Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 21 Hats podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Feldman. This week, Karen Clark-Cole, Paul Downs, and William Vanderbloemen start with a discussion of how 21 Hats might finally take the plunge into monetization. We also discuss Karen's decision to disappoint her salespeople by foregoing a chunk of low-hanging revenue, William's grand experiment in unplugging for 7 weeks this summer, and Paul's need to balance his ownership responsibilities with his personal responsibilities. Plus, we consider the impact of the Great Resignation, and we look for lessons to take from last week's discussion about mental health. Even in good times, owning and running a business can be a lonely pursuit. Our hope is that these weekly conversations will let owners know they are not alone in facing challenges. Same thing with our daily newsletter, the 21 Hats Morning Report, which highlights the most important news of the day for business owners, and which you can subscribe to at 21hats.com, where you can also find transcripts of our podcast episodes and lots of other articles and interviews. One programming note, we're going to take a little break this week, which means we will not publish a podcast the day after Labor Day, but we'll be back as usual the following Tuesday. Joining me this week on the podcast are regulars Karen Clark-Cole, who is CEO of Blink, a user experience research and design firm in Seattle, Paul Downs, who is CEO of Paul Downs Cabinet Makers, which makes custom conference tables outside of Philadelphia, and William Vanderbloemen, who is CEO of Vanderbloemen Search Group, a recruiting firm based in Houston that works with churches and other faith-based organizations. The episode is titled, I Don't Pay for Podcasts. Why would I pay for yours? Welcome back, Karen, Paul, William. It's great to have you all here. This week, I want to do something just a little bit different and start with, me. I'm, as you know, very fortunate to have these weekly conversations with actual real-life experienced, successful entrepreneurs like you guys. And I kind of feel as though I might as well take advantage of that and get a little free advice. So if there are no objections, I would like to give you a quick update on where I stand with 21 Hats and see if you have any reaction, any suggestions for me. The quick update is that, the good news is I'm getting a lot of really positive feedback from exactly the type of people that I was hoping to get it from. The bad news is I'm not a whole lot closer to figuring out how to monetize this and turn it into a real business. I have made a little bit of headway with some sponsors. I've got a couple of small deals going, both with the podcast and with the morning report. But my real inclination has never been to focus on finding sponsors. I feel like I've worked at a bunch of big media companies that learned how difficult that can be. And I would rather charge subscribers who get real value, subscribers and listeners, if in fact they do get real value from this. And obviously that means I have to figure out, what's a reasonable price to charge for that. So I thought what I'd do is give you a quick reminder of what my value proposition is. It's this podcast. Obviously, you guys are familiar with that. It's the daily email newsletter, the morning report. And on top of that, I also do a couple webinars a month where I bring in people for one-off conversations, somebody with in the news, somebody with an interesting idea. But on top of that, what I'm really hoping to build is a sense of community, that the 21 Hats brand stands for something. So there's my update.
Lauren, I don't want to pay for that. I don't pay for any podcasts. Why would I pay for yours? Why not have the sponsors pay?
Because that does take you down a tricky path. And like I said, I've worked at companies that have certainly gone down that path. And the danger is you end up chasing clicks. You end up chasing traffic to satisfy sponsors because they're the ones footing the bill. And there is often a divergence between the needs of the sponsors and the needs of your listeners, your readers.
Well, I think you should guess what I'm going to say. You should do some user research and find out what your listeners want. And I listen to so many great podcasts that I wouldn't even dream of paying for because you just don't do that. I can't imagine.
I disagree. There's plenty of podcasters that support themselves with subscriptions. Sam Harris comes to mind. And I pay Stitcher so that I don't have to listen to ads. So I'm paying something for podcasts so that I have the experience that I like.
But you can decide that, right, Paul? So you can say, I'm gonna subscribe so I don't get ads, or I can keep the ads and have it free.
Yeah, although they sneak in ads anyway on a lot of these things, so you end up skipping. But I would say that it's not asking your audience for direct support is not doomed. Other people do it and it succeeds. So I don't know what the answer is. I do think that Karen's probably right that asking in some way that gives you a reasonably large sample of your people is the first thing. Have you done that?
No, I haven't. I have done it anecdotally, but I have not done real research.
Okay, why not?
That's my question.
Because I'm afraid I might get an answer I don't want to hear.
Oh boy, that'll kill you.
Well, I sympathize because we don't make any real effort to go back to our clients after a couple of years and see how happy they are. Because it is scary. It's like probably the single scariest thing that I confront, and it's defeated me every time. So I sympathize with you on that one.
I appreciate that.
If I was Jay, I'd tell you to get over it. The best way to improve and to have a successful business is to gather feedback all day long from your employees, from your customers. It's how you improve.
That makes sense. I can't argue with that. I've been through a few evolutions of thinking, and that's part of the reason I haven't done the research. Not that that's an excuse. The research would have been helpful at any point, and perhaps that should be my next step. I do have to try something, and there is one low-risk strategy that I am thinking of trying. And I think this is a more serious answer to your question, Karen. It's one thing what you get back in research. It's another thing when you actually ask people to pull out a credit card. And I think what I'm leaning toward at the moment is using the email newsletter as the vehicle. It's very easy for me to add a subscription fee to that, and I would pitch it in the email newsletter as a subscription fee to all things 21 Hats. But what I'm thinking about is not putting up a paywall, making it voluntary, at least initially, and saying essentially to my customers, if you're getting value out of this, please pay me for it. I want to keep it available to as many people as possible. If you can't pay me, if you're not getting value, I understand, but I need to make a living doing this. So I'm asking you to pay, and have that cover the podcast, webinars, and the newsletter, and see what happens.
So you're going to guilt them into it.
Well, that's such a harsh way to put it.
I was going to put it exactly that way. It sounds like a church to me, Lauren.
Or NPR.
Yeah, I can't stand it when they do that.
Maybe the best yoga studio in Houston does just that. Oh, just leave a donation if you'd like to pay for your class. And I don't know what their P&L looks like, but I would walk away feeling bad about even going there. Did I give? Should I have given? Did I give enough? Did I not give enough? Are people getting paid? And it just feels like a charity. And I don't think you should be that bashful about it. I think you should decide where you're going to charge and charge. Frankly, I'd go the advertiser route. I don't pay to listen to any podcast and probably wouldn't.
2-1. We got 2-1.
This is not a democracy, you know.
So straight talk here. You've been operating a particular business model, which, as far as I can tell, relies on growth by percentages. And so it's going to take a while to get to a substantial audience. And you can do whatever business model you feel like as a boss for as long as you have money. So if someone was asking me how I was doing, and in the spirit of honesty, I would have to take into account what my runway looks like. Like, how long can you continue to do what you're doing today without changes? What's going to happen if you don't do anything? And that's a big part of it. That if you, for some reason, could just wait around until lightning strikes, then that's going to inform your answer of what to do next. And if you can't, you have to make a change. That's also going to inform your answer. So I think that you would probably want us to talk about these things this way, again, in the spirit of honesty as a boss to boss. So are you willing to answer that question?
But you're suggesting, though, Paul, that he self-fund it. And I don't think even if he had all the money in the world, you should come up with a business model that's sustainable.
Right. What do you have to do and what do you want to do are two relevant points in any conversation like this.
Well, first of all, I'm happy to answer those questions. You're right. I ask you guys those kinds of questions all the time, and I hardly feel as though I can run away from them. So I have kind of been hoping for lightning to strike thus far. I've probably got a few months of runway left, but I can't keep doing this indefinitely.
So, Lauren, I would encourage you to look at your limiting belief, which is that all advertising is bad and that all advertisers expect you to get clicks where you don't want them. Because what if they have the same mission as you?
Let me stop you. That puts it a little more harshly than I would put it. I don't want to be totally dependent on that kind of revenue if I can avoid it. If that's the only choice, I'm willing to give it a shot and stick to my guns and do this the way I think it should be done as long as I can. But, the New York Times, for example, where I used to work, has been tremendously successful shifting their business model to being dependent on subscription money as opposed to advertising money. But they still take advertising money. That's what I would hope to do here.
And I quit reading them the minute they did that.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm with William.
There are 5,000 other newspapers. I don't need the Times.
You're obviously, not alone in that, but it's been tremendously successful for them. It has worked. They've brought in dramatically more revenue doing that than they expected, despite losing the two of you.
And what newspapers have successfully deployed a different model?
More and more have gone that way.
Yeah, exactly.
But I would encourage you to not compare yourself to the New York Times and compare
Why,
yourself
Karen?
to a podcast. Well, I mean, come off it. We're talking the main value, I think, is the podcast. And then you've got, you described it, right? Then you've got your daily newsletter. But
I'm not sure you're right about that. I don't think that's the case for everybody. There are people who pick one or the other. And, I have a lot more subscribers to the newsletter than I do to the podcast.
Either way, all I'm suggesting is that you're not a newspaper.
I wonder if you could test, Lauren, to see, kind of as has been mentioned, what value are people getting from each thing and where could you create premium value? Like, is it okay, we're going to sell a membership and with that comes a coaching call with X, Y, and Z, or a cohort or an experience or something other than just pure content? Because I think content has just gotten cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and charging for it's getting harder and harder and harder.
I think that's a good point. I do anticipate figuring out some kind of premium offering, especially around events or, office hour phone calls or mastermind phone calls. There's Zoom calls, but I'm not able to offer that right now, and I need something to get me there.
What if you got one sponsor to cover all that?
Well, that would be okay too. I've got 5,000 plus subscribers to the newsletter. It's a little early for me to, go out there and really try to sell that to big time advertisers. I have people coming to me and I'm starting small and I'm hoping to build that while I focus on creating as much good content as I can. All right. Truly enough about me. Karen, we haven't heard from you in a while. What's going on?
What's going on? Continuing to grow and working hard at connecting targets to actuals, which is something that we never used to be as focused on, but
I'm not sure what that means, connecting targets to actuals.
It used to be, okay, we have a target. It's kind of a lick your finger and put it up in the wind and decide how much you should plan to grow this year and then see if you do it. And there's no real strategy connecting the two. And so now as we're bigger, we watch it carefully. We make sure we're constantly adjusting the dials every day to make sure that we can hit those targets, because we have to do all kinds of other, budgets and hiring to support those targets. So if we don't hit it, it has a much bigger impact for us now than it would have when we were smaller. So all that to say, though, some interesting side effects have come out of it that I wouldn't have expected, which is And it's kind of all good. It's a good problem to have, but our clients are asking for services that are kind of on the periphery of what we would normally do. So normally we do project-based consulting work. So we design digital products, and that is on a project by project basis. So we go in, we do the work, and then we get out. And that's been our model for 2 decades. But now our clients are asking us to do research, which is more of it's really what we would consider data collection. Our clients now want us to collect data to make sure that the product that we're working on is, can work in different lighting conditions, can work in different heating conditions. All things are important for the success of this product, but it's not research in our typical way that we've normally done it.
Karen, I think you said it was a nice problem to have. What's the problem?
The problem is we have to turn away. I'm about to make a decision to turn away work because it's not in our sweet spot. So a lot of people are making a case that we should take on this different kind of research because they want the revenue. It's not nearly as profitable work, and so it's a different gross margin, but it's still, at the end of the day, can contribute to the bottom line in a positive way, and it contributes to the top line in a big way. And so, yet I want to grow the company in our core, not in these periphery. And there's a couple of other examples like that. And so I'm about to have to tell the salespeople, you can't take that work anymore. It's okay that it's $3 million. We're not going to take it. And there's a lot of people who are very upset about that, including on the finance team.
So it sounds like the question is, do you deploy the thing you're really good at and find new customers, or do you add services to your existing customers? Is that basically what's going on?
Yeah, and it's not even a decision like that. It's, when I look at it, I say to the sales team, so, I want you guys to focus your effort over here on our core work. And I don't want you to, because it still takes energy for them to land this other work. And they haven't been given clear guidance as to whether they should or shouldn't. The clients are asking for it, and they're like, why not? And so I'm like, well, here's why not. And so, but it's taken a long time to get back to turning that into a decision that I'm going to make, because there's, so many days and people in between when it started and where we're at now. And it's just kind of gotten out of hand. We did one, and now the clients want more and more and more.
It sounds like you've got your mind pretty made up on it. Was it a tough decision for you to reach?
It's been a lot of conversations, a lot of talking to different people to find out, making sure that I really understand it. It's taken a while. And, I tell you, it would have been way faster if we were all just in the office and I could have talked to 10 people in one hallway walk. But because we're all remote still, it takes, I got to set up a Zoom call with these three people, then that one person, and then these 5 people. And it's just taking months instead of what would have been days or weeks.
Is the issue how people are compensated? Is it because salespeople are going to lose opportunities for?
No, they're not on commission even. They're just, it's just going to be a little harder for them because this stuff's in their lap and they have to say no to it, and they don't like saying no to revenue. They do have quotas.
William, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I, just came out of a summer where we made a pretty large experiment with our company, which is self-serving, but an experiment nonetheless. And the experiment is, how necessary is William to the company? And I've tried to talk to all of our clients about succession. It's a huge issue and a particularly huge issue right now and for the next 10, 15 years as the boomers round out their time in the workforce. And so one option for our own company and my succession is that I make myself less and less necessary to the growth and running of the company. And so this summer, we more than doubled my normal time away. We went to about 7 weeks, consecutive weeks of me being gone, totally unplugged. I did do regular check-in calls with my COO, but they were 15, 20 minutes and once or maybe twice a week. I dropped into one staff meeting via Zoom, but didn't lead it. And things went really well. And we didn't take a hit in momentum. The summer is typically very slow for us, whether it's nonprofits or schools or churches. Everybody sort of takes the summer off and then kicks back up in the fall. July was predictably slow. August is not over as we tape this, but it should shape up to be one of our very busiest months ever of any month. So that was all good. And it then creates a whole new set of options and questions for me. I guess I could go play more and more golf and just take passive income and let the company run, and it wouldn't be the old founder around meddling in things. And maybe I don't want to put that to a vote. But the other option that's far more interesting to me and fun is it's almost like, and I don't know if Karen or Paul can relate to this, but I think I've launched at least 3 or 4 companies under the umbrella of this company. You go through an iteration and it's like, and now we're to a new kind of company that we are, kind of like Karen was talking about as we get bigger. And I'm more excited about launching another version of the company where, my COO is very competent at running the day-to-day. I'm no longer needed in any searches or client-facing things.
Is that true, William? Do you think you could have taken a 7-week break during your busy season instead of during your slow season?
That's a great question. That's a great question. And by the way, it was also during a season where we experienced our own turnover. I've been calling this Great Resignation since all the way back in November, and now everyone's dealing with it, and it's the hot topic, and probably should have gotten better PR to make sure people knew I said it. But, I would say this was a pretty good litmus test. One of the people that left, and they left quite a while ago, was our VP of marketing, who's been with me forever and wonderful. And we're almost to the point of replacing her. And as I'm interviewing candidates, I'm like, for good or bad, if you come here, you're saddled with me because I don't need to be client facing anymore. I don't need to be running the operations anymore. You can just leverage me as content producer, speaker, ambassador, whatever you want to do to push the brand forward. And that sounds like that's the kind of work that gives me energy. So I'm excited to see if that's where we can head. And
you didn't answer my question, though.
I said that's a good question.
Yes.
So I don't know the answer to that, Lauren, but I know that you got to start somewhere. And you stretch it out a little bit more each summer. And
fair.
I don't really want to, as you know, as a guy who was in this small giants community, I'm not interested in just growing at lightning speed for the sake of growth. But I'm also not interested in just being custodial about the next 10, 15 years of my work here. So it was a good litmus test, and I'm excited about what it means for the possibility of how I can spend my time here going forward.
I always think about the company runs itself at this point. I can go on vacation. I remember when I took that 3-month sabbatical, and everything will carry on great without me, in fact. But what doesn't happen is the growth. And so, my job is to be looking at what's coming next and then get us there. And so if we just want to, maintain and sustain what we've got, that's the engine is working. And I think you're seeing that. That's a great sign. If the company can run without you, that's a testament to your leadership and your ability to see that there's lots of smart people around. But the question is, will it get to the next level? It's like Laura on one of her podcasts, Jay and Dana were talking about, she wanted to hire a big thinker. And it's like, well, you're the big thinker. The founder of a company is usually the biggest thinker because they dreamed up this thing in the first place. And so, if your job is just to think about what's next and then have others execute it, that all of a sudden it doesn't even feel like work in my mind. It's super fun.
Well, we'll be eager to hear how you proceed with that, William. Quick question for you. You did predict this year of turnover. Where do you think we are now? What are you thinking is the environment going forward? I'm
thinking every time I've tried to foretell what's going to happen with the pandemic, I'm wrong. So I don't know where the Delta variant and people putting off go back to work mode and all that. I don't know how that interplays. But with that caveat, I'd say we're not quite halfway through this Great Resignation. More to come.
What comes next? The great settling down? Nobody quits?
No. I think there's just more and more churn. More and more people saying, I can go do whatever I want. I can work from wherever I want. I mean, and this is probably an entirely separate podcast, but the shift, this is going to sound critical or derogatory. I don't mean for it to entirely, but the shift to employee entitlement is everywhere. From NFL quarterbacks saying, actually, I want to get traded and I want to go play at Team X. Well, that's never heard of before, right? That's a whole new thing. And it's not just in the NFL. It's, a cohort I'm in of CEOs. One guy saying to me, he had a guy Zoom in. They've been remote work for a while, and he Zoomed in. He's like, oh, that's a new background. He said, oh, yeah, I moved to Colorado Springs. It's like, what? Yeah, no, I decided I'm going to work from here from now on, with not checking in with the boss. And that I hear story after story after story of that. So it's not just everybody left their job and started something new and that's that. I think it's going to be a very unsettled, call it 12 more months, maybe even through the end of next calendar year before things calm down a little bit.
The grand reshuffling, right? Everyone's just moving around,
Yep.
unsettled, and they'll land somewhere and it'll be totally different. I think it's exciting, honestly.
Well, I got to the office this morning, and this week's Bloomberg, yes, I still take printed magazines, was sitting on my desk, and it's got a picture of a bunch of millennials on Wall Street standing there staring at the camera. It says, 120,000 to start? We'll think about it. It's I don't think it's going anywhere for a while, Lauren. And so it's got a lot of people that I know are looking to us saying, how'd you do retention bonuses? What can you do to incentivize retention? I mean, retention, I think, was already going to be a big part of the ballgame, given the way a millennial generation does like to jump from job to job. But now it's even more important.
And William, are you seeing, is being hybrid or remote a requirement now?
I don't know the answer to that. I think it depends entirely on the kind of work you're doing.
But in your world, you haven't seen that?
At my company or in my world?
When you're placing people?
So churches have never been huge proponents of big office hours. It's like, no, you need to be out in the community, right? We need to come back together to meet. But they've probably always functioned like hybrids. Schools, on the other hand, hybrid is no, you may not do that. Of all the different things that we all argued about with each other over the last year, I think the one universal opinion I've heard from people on every side of the spectrum is virtual elementary education does not work. So, our educational institutions and our schools are saying, you got to be on campus. We've got to have on-campus learning. So it depends. The type of work, I think, will be the contingency around how much hybrid, how much remote. We have somewhat of a hybrid, but we always have. We have a terrible commute in Houston, so you can pick which 8 hours you want to be here, and they revolve around as early as start at 6 in the morning or start as late as 10 in the morning. But it protects a core of the day from 10 to 2 where everybody's here.
Well, but hybrid means they can work at home for part of the time, right?
Yeah, I'm aware of that. I don't know. We haven't seen that here yet.
It's hard to run a factory hybrid.
Have you tried, Paul?
Yeah, it's called doing nothing. But even in my workforce that can take days off or it's work from home on days tend to come in because there's so much more value to being able to have a quick conversation with the rest of the team that just, I cannot see that happening virtually. Companies make it work, but I can't see how it would work for us.
What is going on in your world, Paul? How are you doing?
Well, the company's doing quite well. We have had some challenges just with people being out of the shop for various reasons, some health reasons, some vacations, what have you, and that really does affect our production. But we've gotten past that. My biggest thing right now is that I'm dealing with a number of personal issues that cause me to not want to throw myself into work. One is my father is in poor health, and then my autistic son, the person who normally takes care of him, is going to be out for 10 weeks. So Nancy and I are poised to zig this way or that way in response to trouble. And I'm very happy that my company mostly runs itself, certainly hour by hour. And I'm still doing things like managing the payroll, but I don't have to work all that hard right now. And I'm just riding that. I don't have any huge plans to become world dominating in my industry, because I don't think that there's anything we could do to really change the basic trajectory of how we're growing. We've tried all of it, but it really comes down to the people who buy my product are tending to go away from the old channels and go towards Google, and that's where we are. And so we're experiencing basically 10% growth every year by doing what we're doing now. So I'm just in a different place than William and Karen, and happy to be there at the moment.
Although it sounds a little bit similar to William in that, for unfortunate reasons, you may have something of a break from the office too, and something of a litmus test as to how your business runs without you.
Yeah, but it's not even if things get hairy on the personal side, it's not like I'm going to be unable to come into work or to work as I do now. Like I consider going to the shop just to be part of my basic day. And I don't necessarily, when I get here, have to do all that much. A lot of times I sit around and just wait for someone to walk in with a problem and then spend 15 minutes solving it and then wait another 4 hours or 6 hours or 2 days. And that's value to the company, but I don't have any immediate things to do on a lot of days. And I'm perfectly happy with that.
We're running short on time. There's one particular question I wanted to ask you guys. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to the podcast that we taped last week and published this week. It was a pretty intense conversation. Laura was expressing some of her challenges, and Jay kind of gave her a little bit of a push, encouraged her to take responsibility, that the problems were hers to fix. And then we learned more about what Laura was going through, and we all felt bad, Jay in particular, about that. And I guess the question I have for all three of you is, I think, given what we've been through the last 18 months, this is probably not an unusual dynamic. And I wonder if you've given thought to the notion of, when you give somebody a push, somebody who's struggling, and when you give them a hug. Anybody have any thoughts about that?
I don't think anyone's allowed to hug anyone ever again in the workplace.
Okay, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to listening first. I listen to the podcast, and it's sort of the nature of it. There's a lot of jumping in with advice without really spending a lot of time listening and hearing the full story. And so I think if it was a different platform or format, then hopefully in real life there'd be, more opportunity to just listen and find out what's really going on. That's
a good point.
I guess my reaction is that it was a demonstration of the perils of advice, but what didn't really get talked about was the underlying message that is delivered to business owners at all times by the preponderance of the media, which is that, it's sort of like what Jay said, you're the boss, suck it up, and if you're not succeeding, then you own it. And I think that that's really harmful advice. The second thing is that...
What do you mean, Paul? What are you thinking when you say that's harmful advice coming from the media?
Well, for many, many years, I sat in my office and read Inc. magazine and the New York Times and blah, 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 and wondered why my business didn't succeed, and really put it on my own shoulders and did not make any attempt or find ways to get better advice. And I think that just the suck it up advice is actually usually pretty bad because it's based on an incomplete understanding of the facts. And when I started writing for you, I had to start to describe what was going on in my world. And I realized it was almost impossible to deliver a full picture of what's going on around any particular problem in any reasonable amount of time. Like getting back to Laura's problem, she was talking about conflicts between members of her team, but we didn't spend much time talking about those team members, and that's critical information. We didn't spend much time talking about her struggles or we didn't start by spending much time talking about her struggles with just general optimism and mental health. And that was critical information. And then there was bound to be a bunch of other stuff that was critical information that we didn't even get to. And it comes down to nobody knows what's really going on like you do, and you're going to bring to it whoever you are.
And it's complicated, right, Paul? I mean, what you're getting to is that everything is complicated, and just
everything
because
is
you're
complicated.
Running a business doesn't mean you're not complicated.
Right. But then also oh, here's a kick in the ass. That's not often helpful. I think that here's maybe how you've dealt with similar problems, or here's how other people have done it, is the next level of advice. But trying to actually guide someone to helping themselves, what do they need to do? That to me is the level that was missing in that conversation. It was an acknowledgement that the thing was complicated, and then sort of stop there. And yeah, Jay felt bad about it because he had jumped in with the conventional wisdom to start with. And conventional wisdom is often incomplete or inapplicable to many people's situation.
Those are all good points. I will say that Dana and Laura have both thanked Jay in the past for jumping in and doing that. But obviously the situation was different. And obviously you're also right about the limits of the format. There's only so much you can cover in a podcast. We do hope to come back to it again in the future.
In that conversation, that what kept coming up is it's your fault and you have to go deal with it. And I just think about it so differently. I just think, well, no, there's no one to blame. It's just these things happen, and it's a leader's responsibility to listen and to look and to evaluate every situation, because every day is different. I haven't had one day on the job that's the same. And if I wasn't if I didn't come to work saying, okay, what am I going to learn today? Then how could I ever have learned along the way? And so it's just a different way of thinking about it. And I think that the thing that is true is it's hard. Like running a company, owning a company, being a founder, whatever it is, it's hard. And it's not, and I always like to say it's not for the faint of heart. Like you have to be tough at the end of the day. And it's not easy no matter what it is.
We also need to acknowledge that you're going to experience highs and lows, even if you don't have that history that Laura had. I'm not wired that way. I'm a very optimistic person, and I run through troughs and peaks, and that's the nature of reality. The external factors can make the basic advice of suck it up and do what you need to do either harder or easier. Like, I don't know how we would have gotten through in my company. We would have gotten through the last year if it hadn't been for the government suddenly showering me with money. Well, that changed everything, and that had nothing to do with my attitude. And so there's going to be a level at which you can do what you can do, but there's a level beyond it too.
I think what's important as well is to separate, the conversation started last week with talking about the issues and the problems that Laura was feeling and having in her business. And then it ended in, her personal life, which they're obviously very connected. And I think, running a company is hard enough. And when Laura has these real struggles, and mental health it's the real deal. Like all of us have to take care of it to one degree or another. And there are folks, like Laura mentioned, where her chemistry is different, and she has to take great care. And it was so awesome for me to hear how she really understands it and she's really taking care of it. And I think, and on top of all that, she's running a complicated business, which has real challenges. And so I think what she's doing is she should be writing books about it. She should be up there talking and showing others. You can have all kinds of things going on in your personal life, and you can still do it, because I think there's a lot of people who would be inspired who may say, I have a really hard time getting out of bed, so therefore I can't do all these hard things. And it's not easy for her, but she's doing it, and she's really, really successful at it.
All right. My thanks, especially for the free advice, to Karen Clark-Cole, Paul Downs, and William Vanderbloemen. As always, thanks for sharing, guys. I really appreciate it. Wait. Don't leave yet. If you have a question or a comment that you'd like the 21 Hats owners to address, send it to me by replying to your morning report or by email at lauren@21hats.com. That's LOREN@21hats.com. Do it now before you forget. And don't be afraid to tell Jay what you really think. He can take it. And if you got something out of this conversation, help us reach more business owners. Tell a friend. Subscribe and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Twitter. Subscribe to The Morning Report at 21hats.com. This episode was produced by Jess Thuberon, founder of Blank Word Productions. Okay, now you can leave. Thanks for listening, everyone.